Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Before we dive into tonight's spine-chilling story, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss any of our eerie tales from the unknown. Tonight, we have a true story that will send shivers down your spine. The Curse of the Old Church on Hilltop. It's a terrifying account of an ancient church that's haunted by a malevolent force. Something that's been tormenting anyone who dares to set foot on its grounds. Stay with us as we unfold the dark secrets of this forsaken place. It was a cold, moonlit evening in the small, sleepy town of Hillsborough, nestled in the hills of upstate New York. The old church atop Hilltop had stood for over a century, its weathered stone walls hiding a dark secret. The locals avoided the area, whispering about the curse that had plagued the church for generations. But for Michael and Sarah, it was just another adventure. Michael, a history buff, had always been fascinated by abandoned buildings. His wife, Sarah, wasn't as keen on the idea, but her curiosity got the best of her. The couple had heard the stories from the townspeople. Tales of strange noises, unexplained shadows, and terrifying visions that drove people to madness. But they didn't believe in ghosts. Not really. As they approached the church on that fateful night, the air grew heavy. The church's silhouette loomed against the night sky. Its stained glass windows cracked and shattered. The once grand steeple had long since fallen, leaving only a jagged stump reaching toward the heavens. Michael was eager to explore. "Look at this place, Sarah," he said, his voice filled with excitement. "It's just like something out of a horror story." But Sarah hesitated. "I don't know, Michael. This place gives me the creeps." Her instincts were right. As they crossed the overgrown path leading to the church's main entrance, Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. It wasn't just the cold night air. It was something deeper, something unnatural. The trees around them seemed to lean in closer, casting long shadows that made the air feel suffocating. They stepped inside. The scent of mildew and decay immediately hit their nostrils. The interior of the church was eerily silent, except for the faint sound of creaking wood and the occasional flutter of bat wings overhead. The pews were broken, the once gleaming altar now a rotting carcass of its former self. Michael pulled out his flashlight and swept it across the room, his excitement growing. "This place is incredible. Imagine the history here." But Sarah wasn't convinced. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching them. "Maybe we should go back," she whispered, her voice trembling. But Michael wasn't ready to leave. "We're already here. Let's take a look around. There has to be something interesting." As they ventured deeper into the church, Sarah noticed something strange. In the corner of the room, hidden in the shadows, was an old dusty book. Its cover was worn, and the pages looked yellowed with age. She approached it slowly, a feeling of dread filling her chest. "Michael, look at this," Sarah called, her voice barely above a whisper. Michael turned and walked over. "What is it?" He picked up the book, and as soon as his fingers touched it, a cold gust of wind blew through the church, slamming the door shut behind them. They both froze. The book seemed to pulse in Michael's hands. He flipped it open, revealing pages filled with strange symbols and dark rituals. As he scanned the text, Sarah felt her heart race. There was something wrong with this place, and it wasn't just the church. Before Michael could say anything, a loud crash echoed from above, followed by the sound of footsteps. Heavy, Slow footsteps. They turned in unison, but saw nothing. The footsteps grew louder, closer. "Who's there?" Michael shouted, his voice trembling with a mix of fear and frustration. No answer. Suddenly, the temperature in the room dropped dramatically. Sarah could see her breath in the air. Then, out of the corner of her eye, she saw a shadow move across the wall. It was tall, imposing, and it was heading toward them. "Michael, we need to go. Now!" Sarah screamed, grabbing his arm. But it was too late. The door they had entered through was now locked, the knob cold and unyielding. The shadow grew larger as it approached, and Sarah felt the overwhelming presence of something ancient. Something evil. It was coming for them. Just as she was about to scream, the shadow stopped. In the distance, they heard the faintest whisper, a voice that seemed to come from nowhere. "Get out." It was the voice of a man, low and guttural, filled with malice. Sarah clung to Michael, her heart pounding in her chest. "Who are you?" Michael shouted, his voice quivering. No answer. The shadow was gone. The next morning, Sarah and James couldn't shake off the unsettling feeling they had after their visit to the church. The cold air that surrounded the place seemed to linger with them, and the sense of being watched hadn't disappeared. But life had to go on, so they tried to push the incident to the back of their minds. However, things began to escalate rapidly. It was Sarah's grandmother who first told them the truth. Sarah had always been close to her, and after hearing the strange events they had experienced, the elderly woman knew it was time to speak up. The truth about the church had been buried for decades, only whispered about in dark corners. "I never told you this," Grandma began, her voice shaking as she sat Sarah and James down. "But I used to work at that church when I was a girl. Just a little younger than you are now, Sarah." Sarah felt the hairs on her neck stand up. "What happened there, Grandma?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Grandma took a deep breath. "I don't know if you've heard the story of Father Michael, but there are whispers that something dark happened at that church many years ago. People who went in were never the same. Some disappeared entirely." James leaned forward, his curiosity piqued. "What do you mean disappeared?" Sarah's grandmother sighed heavily, the weight of the memories clearly affecting her. "Father Michael wasn't always a priest. He came to us from a town far away. The people said he was a good man, a man of God. But when he arrived, strange things started happening. People began having nightmares, waking up to strange symbols etched into their walls, and children went missing in the night." Sarah shuddered at the mention of children. "And what happened to Father Michael?" Her grandmother's eyes clouded with a mixture of fear and sorrow. "One day he was found dead in the church. His body was found in the center of the sanctuary. But there was something odd about his death. It wasn't natural, not at all. The priest's body, it was almost like he had aged years in just one night. They say he had been part of a dark ritual, and that ritual went horribly wrong. Some people claim he never left that church. His spirit, some say it still haunts the Hilltop." Sarah felt the room close in on her. The air grew colder, and she could almost hear the whispers of the lost souls that were rumored to be trapped there. The truth of what they were dealing with had become painfully clear. "Are you saying the church is cursed?" Sarah asked, her voice barely audible, as if speaking too loudly would summon the darkness itself. Grandma nodded grimly. It's been cursed for years, and it gets stronger with every passing day. No one who has entered that place has ever left unchanged, if they left at all. Sarah and James exchanged a look, their resolve hardening. The visit to the church hadn't been the end of their journey. It had only marked the beginning. They knew they had to uncover the full truth behind the curse. But the path ahead was not one they could walk alone. There was more to learn, and they needed to understand the full scope of the evil that had plagued this place for decades. Sarah stood up, determination burning in her eyes. "We need to go back," she said, her voice steady and resolute. "We have to face whatever is there, whatever is haunting that church. The truth needs to be known." James didn't hesitate. He had seen the fear in Sarah's eyes, and now he understood it. This wasn't just about solving a mystery. It was about confronting something far darker, something that was hungry, and it had been waiting for them to return. The curse of the old church wasn't just a story. It was their reality now. Together, they would go back to Hilltop, but they knew that they might not return as the same people. Something was waiting for them there. Something evil, and it was watching. The wind howled through the trees as Sarah and James made their way back to the Hilltop church. The shadows of the old building stretched ominously across the ground, as though the church itself was reaching out to pull them in. Every step they took seemed to echo with the weight of the curse that had been placed on this land. The air was thick with tension, and their hearts pounded in their chests. As they approached the church, Sarah couldn't help but notice the strange markings on the door. Markings she hadn't seen before. They were faint but unmistakable, symbols of a long-forgotten language. The same symbols her grandmother had mentioned. She felt a chill run down her spine. "Do you see that?" Sarah whispered, pointing to the door. James squinted, his eyes widening as he took in the sight. "What is that? It wasn't there before." Before they could say anything more, the heavy doors of the church creaked open on their own, as if beckoning them inside. The smell of damp wood and decayed stone hit them immediately, the stench of abandonment and despair lingering in the air. "I don't think we should do this," James muttered, his voice trembling slightly. "What if we're making things worse?" But Sarah stood tall. Her fear mingled with a sense of duty. She was determined to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. "We have to go in. If we don't, this evil will keep spreading." They stepped inside the church together, and as soon as they crossed the threshold, the temperature dropped. The once peaceful sanctuary now felt like a prison, a place trapped in time, a place that had absorbed every dark secret that had ever been buried there. The air felt oppressive, as if the walls themselves were watching them. The altar stood at the far end, darkened by the shadows of years of neglect. But there was something else, a presence, something malevolent lurking in the corner of the church. Suddenly, the faint sound of footsteps echoed from the back of the church, slow and deliberate. Sarah and James froze. The footsteps grew louder, coming closer. Then a voice, low and guttural, reached their ears. "Why did you come here?" It was Father Michael's voice, but it wasn't right. It was twisted, distorted, like something trying to mimic a human. Sarah's heart raced, and her breath caught in her throat. Who are you?" Sarah stammered. The figure that emerged from the shadows was not the Father Michael they had heard about. It was something far worse. His eyes were blackened, hollow, as if life had been drained from him. His face was pale, stretched tight over bones, and his skin seemed to ripple, as if it was no longer flesh, but something otherworldly. "I am the curse," the figure rasped. "I was once human, but now I'm bound to this place, forever." James stepped back, his knees shaking. No, this can't be real. But it was. This was no hallucination. This was the evil that had been unleashed on this land. A spirit trapped in an eternal torment, feeding off the souls of anyone foolish enough to enter. Father Michael, or whatever was left of him, raised his hand, and the church began to shake. The floor trembled beneath their feet as if the very foundation of the building was about to collapse. The walls seemed to close in, and the temperature plummeted even further. "Leave this place now," Father Michael's voice echoed. But it was no longer his voice. It was the voice of countless souls, trapped and tormented by the curse that had begun with him. "Leave, or suffer the same fate as those before you." But Sarah was undeterred. She stepped forward, defiance burning in her eyes. "You're not going to scare us. We're going to end this. We're going to free you from this torment." The figure laughed, a sound that sent a chill through their bones. "You cannot free me. I am beyond saving. All who come here are doomed. You have no choice but to join me." Suddenly, the church was filled with a deafening screech, like the sound of 1,000 souls crying out in pain. The air was thick with an oppressive force, and it seemed like the very walls of the church were closing in on them. But just as it seemed they would be consumed by the darkness, something strange happened. The altar, which had been shrouded in shadow, began to glow with a faint light. A beam of energy shot up from the altar, piercing the darkness and surrounding the figure of Father Michael. "No, you can't!" the figure screamed, its form flickering and distorting as if it were being pulled apart. The curse was unraveling, and it was too late for Father Michael to stop it. The evil that had bound him to this place for so long was being broken. The figure let out a final scream before it vanished, leaving only silence behind. The church slowly returned to normal, the oppressive weight lifting. The air became warmer, and the darkness that had once filled the church faded. It was over. Sarah and James stood in stunned silence, their hearts still racing from the terror they had just faced. They had done it. They had freed the church from the curse that had haunted it for so many years. But as they turned to leave, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something still lingered in the air, something unfinished. "Let's go," James said, his voice shaky but relieved. They left the church behind them, stepping back into the world outside, but the memory of what had happened would stay with them forever. The curse of the old church on Hilltop had been broken, but they both knew that some things never truly go away. Some evil is never truly vanquished. The terrifying curse of the old church on Hilltop has finally been revealed, and though darkness lurks, there is still hope. Sometimes, to defeat the evil that threatens us, we must face our greatest fears. Don't let fear control your life, and always believe that there is a way out of the darkness. If you felt connected to this story, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss out on more thrilling tales. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below and share this story with your friends. Keep supporting the channel so we can bring more spine-chilling stories and mysteries your way. See you in the next story.